Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation right here, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Friday afternoon. Hopefully everybody's having a good day, despite the news. But don't worry, we've got a couple of good, positive stories, or at least one for you, and all sorts of other things. A lot of news today. There was some breaking stuff that happened last night. We're going to talk about that today. A couple of trending stories, actually. We have more. We're going to talk about Paul Manafort and Tad Devine. We have Betsy DeVos, another DeVos story for you. Then we have a story about Medicare for All, or why we need Medicare for All, another reason. We also have a good news, a really good piece of legislation on Puerto Rico. So that was just introduced by Democrats in the Senate. You're going to love that. So that's what we've got today. If you haven't already, please give us a share so we can share those stories with more people. That helps out a lot. So before I get into it, a couple of announcements here. For one, of course, if you haven't checked it out, we're doing a Sunday stream over at Get Vocal. So Get Vocal, of course, is a new social media platform where it encourages people to actually have discussions face-to-face. So you can actually, because, look, man, the reasoning, and they explain the reasoning to me, is that there's so much incivility online when people have discussions online about political topics, right? Important, maybe even controversial topics. Being face-to-face kind of removes that a little bit. And so it's so people can get together who might not agree on issues and then kind of hash it out in a respectful manner. And I think that's actually really good. I think that's something that we actually need in today's discourse. That's why I'm actually working with Get Vocal. And I want you guys, if you guys enjoy the show, and look, I know there's a lot of you who love chatting on the live stream and things like that. You sign up with Get Vocal, you can actually chat with each other in real time, face-to-face. That's pretty cool. They have apps for Android, iOS, and they're working on Android. So, no reason not to get vocal. Now, if you're interested, of course, in watching our streams, it'll be streamed on Get Vocal, also on YouTube as well. We finally figured out the YouTube integration. So I suggest chat here, watch the stream over there, or have it open in both windows. And then after the stream, discuss. And that's eventually what I want you guys to be able to do, is to have a discussion on the stuff that we talk about on video. So, and it will not be live streamed. Guest discussions are not live streamed. So just to let you know. So you can have a nice little conversation offline through video. Anyway, that's why I'm working with them. So it's going to be great. That'll be at Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern. So check that out. Not only that, tomorrow I will be heading to Flint for a Abdul El-Sayed rally. That includes Ocasio-Cortez, and I will hopefully be able to interview Abdul El-Sayed tomorrow. So check that out. We're going to try to do a live interview with him, and that would be awesome. So tune in, please. Okay, that said, we've got a lot of stories. We'll get into it. Please like and share. Also, please consider using the YouTube Super Chat. That, of course, helps the show. You can give me tips. You can, story tips. You can give me feedback and all that stuff, and I will read it. Okay. Anyway, let's move on. Let's start with a fun story. Trump, of course. I know. We have to have it. I got to do it. Now, European leaders know that our president is not very smart. He's not a very stable genius, contrary to his claims. And so when dealing with President Trump, they've had to go to extraordinary measures to try to get him to understand the implications of his policies. Not only that, but also to try to avoid hurting his feelings. The newest example of that is the recent trade fight. Now, look, it was reported yesterday that President Trump pulled back his commitment to putting a lot of tariffs on the European Union. Now, what happened? Well, now we have some details of why and how the European Commission got President Trump to change his position. European Commission President, according to The Hill, Jean-Claude Juncker, hopefully I'm saying that right, reportedly had used colorful cards with simple explanations to discuss trade policies during his Wednesday meeting with President Trump. The Wall Street Journal has reported on Thursday that Juncker relied on more than a dozen of the cards while explaining trade topics to Donald Trump, including automotive trade, ahead of their Rose Garden announcement to hold formal trade talks. You're going to love this, right? So this is Juncker's, this is their explanation of why Juncker used these cards. Quote, "We knew this wasn't an academic seminar. It had to be very simple." Which we knew. It's not an academic seminar. It's just trade, which is complicated. Translation. We know your president is a moron. We know he doesn't read. So we developed cute little flashcards like we would use for a toddler. And hey, guess what? It worked. It worked. Juncker and Trump reportedly emerged from the meeting with a handshake deal to avoid a trade war between the United States and the EU. The leaders announced that they would work towards zero tariffs, and the EU agreed to increase U.S. soybean imports and decrease industrial tariffs. Now, Trump also backed off from a threat to slap hefty tariffs on automotive imports as part of the agreement. So, hey, look at that. We actually do have an agreement, and the tariffs are getting pulled back. Yay, that's actually a good win. But it's just hilarious how he had to get explained through flashcards that, hey, maybe your tariffs and stuff, they're not actually working. We're allies. We're supposed to be friendly. So, yeah, just bring us your concerns and we'll work through them. You don't have to do the tariffs. Now, how's President Trump taking this? Oh, he's crowing. The president claimed on Wednesday that basically, quote, "We opened up Europe to U.S. imports." Wait, we already had imports in Europe from the United States. He also said, before I get to that, I want to note that there is no formal agreement. But Trump's already saying, there's an agreement, we opened up Europe. In fact, quote, "We just opened up Europe for you farmers. You're not going to be too angry with Trump, I can tell you." Oh, my God. Oh, man. So here's the thing. Again, we see this is a pattern with President Trump. So he creates a problem. Tariffs, right? He says, trade from the EU is so terrible. There's nothing we could do. We got to put tariffs. Or you could just negotiate. That's what like normal leaders do. They go in and negotiate. It's not like they're enemy nations. They're friends. The European Union will be trading with for a long time. So if you just open up a dialogue with them and say, hey, look, we think our trade policies are a little bit skewed towards you. We would like to reduce our trade deficit, and here's how we'd like to do it. Now, President Trump, instead of doing that, he's like, tariffs. You get a tariff. You get a tariff. You get a tariff. You all get tariffs. Tariffs for everybody. He's like the fucking Oprah of tariffs, in case that wasn't clear. But in reality, look, he could have done something different. But what this did, it whipped everybody up, obviously. And then he went to a meeting in which basically they had to explain that actually, President Trump, here's a flashcard that explains that you're actually kind of wrong and that trade is sort of complicated. I mean, who knew trade could be so complicated? I think everybody. President Trump, of course, backs off and then goes on Twitter and claims victory. What a child. Baby. Sad. Now, the other takeaway that I can get from this is that if you're dealing with actors that actually don't have any sort of, I guess, they're not acting. I wouldn't say they're acting on behalf of the United States, because obviously they wouldn't, or acting on behalf of their own countries, but also, people who are just bad actors in general, using this same strategy, knowing that our president is an idiot and that he can be basically talked into anything, especially if you come on and you're strong about it, to manipulate the president of the United States. That's not a good thing. I mean, yes, if somebody can, a friend who can manipulate the president of the United States, well, so can anybody else. I mean, look at what happened with Kim Jong-un. Still no formal agreement. They're still working on their nuclear arsenal. They're still expanding their nuclear facilities. They're not doing nuclear disarmament. I mean, they know that they can just, be strong, give him a handshake, say some nice things, and that he'll bend. Because that's what he does. Because he's not a smart person, and he's definitely not a very stable genius. I think that's fairly clear. Okay. Moving on. So yesterday there was a bombshell report that showed that Donald Trump's ex-lawyer, Michael Cohen, is telling CNN that President Trump knew about the 2016 meeting in Trump Tower. Now that's interesting. Now this is, of course, the meeting that Donald Trump Jr. had taken in an effort to get supposed dirt on Hillary Clinton. Now that dirt would have came from people connected to Russia and to the Russian government. In fact, as I said before, I'll go back to the email that Donald Jr. had gotten from somebody connected and said, this is part of the Russian government's support of Donald Trump. Here, we're going to give you this dirt on Hillary Clinton. So, anyway, let me get to the details. According to sources with the knowledge, Michael Cohen is now willing to make that assertion to special counsel Robert Mueller. He's like, Mueller, I got some information for you. I want to talk to you, right? I know that the president knew about this meeting, and basically he was lying. Okay, anyway. Now, to be clear, 100% clear, the sources said Cohen does not have evidence of this, such as audio recordings to corroborate his claim, but he is willing to attest to his account. So, of course, you could be a little bit skeptical and say, well, Cohen, look, he's spent decades lying for Donald Trump. What makes you think that he's telling the truth now? And that's a fair assumption, right? Basically, what you have here are people, everybody in this situation, as I'm going to show you, has already lied a great deal. So really, in order to figure out who might be telling the truth, you kind of have to figure out the motives and such. But anyway, Cohen alleges that he was present along with several others when Trump was informed of the Russians' offer by Trump Jr. By Cohen's account, Trump approved going ahead with the meeting with the Russians, according to their sources. Now, at the meeting, Trump Jr. was joined by his brother-in-law, Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort, who was then Trump's campaign manager. There were 4 Russians in the room, including a lawyer with Kremlin ties, that is Natalia Veselnitskaya, a businessman who worked for an oligarch, and a lobbyist with old KGB connections. Now, the June 2016 meeting was arranged after a publicist who knew Trump Jr. told him in emails that a senior Russian official offered to provide the Trump campaign with damaging information about Hillary Clinton, and that the outreach, and this was in the email, part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. Now, at the time, the Russian operative to covertly boost Trump's candidate wasn't publicly known. Trump Jr. had responded, quote, "If it's what you say, I love it," and then started to arrange the meeting. Now, of course, they ended up having that meeting, and supposedly nothing came of that meeting, We don't necessarily know what came of that meeting, but Donald Trump Jr.'s account is they started talking about the McGinsky Act, and then I got bored because they weren't talking about the dirt on Clinton, so we just kind of left. I mean, they were talking about children and adoption. I don't care about anything about that. No, I care about dirt on Clinton. So that was his official retelling of the meeting. Now, following the revelation of that meeting, Don Jr., of course, said, by the way, even though like they didn't have what I wanted, so I didn't even tell my dad about it until later. Which to me doesn't make sense. Why would you not, if somebody came to you with like, hey, I got dirt on Clinton, your Democratic opponent, and they want a meeting, why would you not tell your father who was running this campaign? And you're also part of the campaign. You're a surrogate. Why would you not say that? It doesn't make any sense. Of course they talked about it. Of course they did. At least, look, you asked me, that's my opinion, right? I believe wholeheartedly that they did have this conversation and that Donald Trump Jr. and that Donald Trump has been lying about it this entire time. So in this case, I actually do believe what Michael Cohen has said. Now, afterwards, the Trump team offered misleading explanations and had changed their story several times. So, look, the thing about a lie is it's really hard to keep your lies straight, right? And so when the Trump campaign or the Trump administration now comes out and says, oh, this happened. Oh, wait, actually, it was this happened. Oh, actually, you know what? He ended up, Donald Trump did know about this, and that was, but nobody knew about it, and Trump didn't know. But come on, dude. How long, how many lies do you have there? And how are you not able to keep them straight? Again, it makes it even more shady. Now, here's the attorney for Donald Trump Jr. I'm going to give you a quote. Donald Trump Jr. has been professional and responsible throughout the Mueller and congressional investigations. We are confident of the accuracy and reliability of the information that is provided by Mr. Trump Jr. and on his behalf. So maintaining that, no, my father did not know about this meeting where we were going to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. I wasn't going to tell him. I wasn't going to say anything. Why? Because you knew it was wrong? Doubtful. You think Donald Trump Jr. cares about the thing that anything that he does is wrong? You think he's like, ooh, no, you know what? I'm going to take this meeting that is going to be collusion, which, by the way, as I said before, it's not a crime. But I'm going to do this meeting, and I'm going to basically make it known that I'm more than willing to do collusion to help my dad out. And then I'm not going to tell him about it. Again, that just doesn't make sense, considering how close the Trump family is to each other. But anyway, I've got more quotes here. Here's President Trump, who's going to respond, quote, I did not know of the meeting with my son, Don Jr. Sounds to me like someone is trying to make up stories in order to get himself out of an unrelated jam. Taxi cabs, anyone? And that's a reference to, of course, what they're investigating in Manhattan when it comes to Cohen. And then here's the great part. So in classic Trump fashion, now he's going to blame Hillary Clinton. Quote, he even retained Bill and Crooked Hillary's lawyer. Gee, I wonder if they helped him make the choice. Oh, so no, it's Hillary Clinton. It's Hillary Clinton's fault. Because now she's going and talking to Cohen, and she's telling Cohen to make all these accusations and to make tapes and to do all this stuff. Really? Really? Now, it's amazing how somebody who spent the first year of Trump's presidency hiding in the woods could be so powerful and influential as to turn your ex-lawyer, your fixer, against you. Weird. I didn't know Hillary had such powers. I mean, sure, she's got rigging powers, but, you know, apparently they weren't good enough to defeat Donald Trump. Anyway, now, to be fair, though, look, this is a new admission from Cohen. So either Cohen is lying now or Cohen has lied before. Now, again, I maintain that I believe Cohen is now telling the truth. However, it could be the opposite, and I do admit that. and to show you his inconsistency and why he's not necessarily the greatest, most honest person to listen to, he had privately testified last year in 2 congressional committees that he was not at the meeting, that Donald Trump did not actually know about this meeting with Trump Jr. and the Russians until long afterwards. So that's what he testified in these congressional committees. A source familiar with Cohen's House testimony said he did not testify that Trump had advanced knowledge. Cohen's claims weren't mentioned in separate reports issued by both Republicans and Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee. So, again, is he telling the truth? Is he not telling the truth? I do believe he is on this instance. But again, and I'm going to go to this as you know, and actually quote Giuliani on this, which is the weirdest fucking thing, that he's not necessarily credible because of what he had said before and because of who he worked for. But nonetheless, I'm still going to believe him on this issue at least. But first, let me go to Rudy Giuliani here. He told Chris Cuomo on Cuomo Prime Time Thursday night that Cohen has, quote, been lying all week. He's been lying for years. I just don't see how he's got any credibility. He also said Cohen is the kind of witness that can really destroy your whole case, and called Cohen a pathological liar. So here's what we have, right? We have somebody who's been caught up in lies, calling someone else a liar who covers for another liar. All of these people here are known to be liars. They are known liars. They've all been lying about something. So the truth here is really, really difficult to find. And I could be wrong. I could be wrong in the idea, in the assertion that Cohen now is telling the truth because he has flipped on Donald Trump. But none, and the reason is, of course, it seems unthinkable that he didn't first bring this meeting to his dad. That didn't say, hey, Dad, I'm meeting with the Russians. I'm meeting with somebody who's got dirt on Clinton. Oh, great. Yeah, go ahead. Because to me, it seems like Donald Trump is the kind of person that would do anything he could to win, even if it's not exactly, you know, wholesome, I guess. I'm trying to find the word here on that. So, but this, of course, would also mean that, look, we are surrounded by liars and cheats and thieves. This entire investigation, I mean, again, you have people, you know, that have turned against Trump, that have been found to have been lying, not necessarily on this, but had lied on behalf of Trump, that had lied to FBI investigators, that have obstructed justice, that have been found guilty doing things like money laundering and wire fraud. And so all this is, right, is basically you're trying to investigate. What Mueller's investigating is a den of thieves, is a snake pit where every snake is worse than the last. And so that's what's going on here. So I do believe, as I said before, Cohen is telling the truth in this, probably to save his own ass. But that's the whole point. You squeeze Cohen, you squeeze him, until he goes, okay, finally. Okay, look, here's what's going on. Now, don't give me so much time in prison. And that's what this is. So, now what this means for the Trump administration, look, it ain't going to mean anything good. That's for sure. Look, collusion might not be a crime in itself, but lying to the FBI, doing obstruction of justice, that is. So, what does this mean? Well,
ladies and gentlemen, we got it.
Nope. Not yet. But it feels like we're getting closer. Okay. All right. One more related story, and then we'll take a break. Okay. So this is another development in the case against Paul Manafort. So Manafort, of course, is in a lot of trouble for his work that he did lobbying on behalf of former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. Now, there's another person that was noted that a lot of centrists were talking about that was named in the case against Manafort, and this was Tad Devine. Now, Tad Devine ended up being in some of the documents, and, of course, a recipient of some emails related to Manafort. Now, these same centrists, these are people that are very, very vehemently anti-Bernie Sanders, anti-progressive. They're like, aha! Aha! We caught you. Tad Devine is a Russian agent. He's a Russian Kremlin plant, and so is Bernie Sanders. And the only reason that he was there is to try to destroy the election for Hillary Clinton. We got him. We got him. We got him. No, you don't. So this is fun because this latest news actually absolves Tad Devine of any of that. Now, let me give you some context here. According to The Hill, Devine previously worked with Manafort on behalf of Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. So that's what they make the Russian connection, because Viktor Yanukovych was actually a very big Putin ally. Now, according to BuzzFeed News, a partner in his current consulting firm said that Devine had actually just been asked to assist in Manafort's prosecution. Not that he is a target, but they're like, hey, you worked with Manafort. You might have information on Manafort. Why don't we work together so you can help, so you can testify against him? In fact, according to a statement provided by Julian Mulvey, a partner at Devine Mulvey Longabaugh, the special counsel has asked Tad Devine to assist in the prosecution of their case against Paul Manafort regarding his firm's work on media consulting on past political campaigns in Ukraine. When the special counsel sought assistance from us in its ongoing investigation, we readily provided it. Now, what is this investigation about? This is actually not related immediately to Russia. Well, no, what this is that Paul Manafort, when he was lobbying on behalf of Ukraine, first he declined to actually register as a foreign lobbyist, as a foreign agent. Now, you can lobby on behalf of other countries' political parties, but you just have to tell the government about it. Manafort's like, rules, who cares? No, I'm not going to register. Not only that, but I'm also going to hide my earnings. I'm going to hide it somewhere else. And I'm also going to launder money. In fact, he's facing bank and tax fraud charges in Virginia that were brought by prosecutors in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office. Now, his trial is set to begin next week. So, the statement provided to BuzzFeed by Devine's firm says that it had been assured by the special counsel's office that we have no legal exposure and did not act unlawfully. But wait a minute. But I thought Tad Devine, I thought he was a Russian agent. I thought he was working on behalf of Putin to lose the election for Hillary by losing the primary for Hillary. And if that happened, then Bernie Sanders would have won the nomination. And actually, because he polled better than Donald Trump, that he actually would have won the election, and then Donald Trump would have lost, which would have been great for Putin, except that it wouldn't. You see how easily that whole thing falls apart? If Bernie Sanders had won, we would be talking about how to, implement Medicare for all. Yes, the Russia thing would have come up, but guess what? Bernie Sanders would have actually likely put sanctions on Russia for any sort of election interference. If you think otherwise, then you're not in the reality-based world. You're not there. But anyway, I love that conspiracy, by the way. It's hilarious. Hey, look, there's Russian agents everywhere, man. You better call Matt out. Russian agents, Tad Devine, Bernie Sanders, everybody, right? No, the reason, look, that they wanted Devine to testify is that he might have seen this behavior, and it sort of makes sense, right? Might have seen and heard what Manafort was talking about, and might have some inside information, or might be able to say, hey, look, I worked with him. I saw the kind of work that he was doing, and here's what I think might have happened with that money. Like, he didn't tell me about this, that he didn't register as a foreign agent, and all that stuff. But none of this means that Devine did anything wrong. In fact, again, as I said before, the special counsel said he did not act unlawfully at all. And now he's cooperating to help prosecute Manafort and is not a subject of prosecution. So I think that's very, very important to point out. And now, of course, will that stop any of the conspiracies against Bernie Sanders? No, of course not. But at least here, we have the truth. Okay. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We got more show, including Betsy DeVos, a woman, an unfortunate death that could have been prevented had we had health care. And, of course, Democrats in Puerto Rico. So we got some good news. All right. Stay right here. Come right back. Also, I'm going to check some super chats. So if you have a super chat, go ahead and send it, and I will read it when we come after the break. All right. Thank you. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here at TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. If you haven't already, please give us a like and share. I'm going to read a super chat here before I get back into the show. LL says, next thing you know, Trump will be opening up trade to the Silk Road. And he will go on Twitter and he will say, Trump administration, no. Trump opened up Silk Road. Democrats, something Democrats could never do. Win bigly with trade. MAGA. Or something similarly nonsensical. But anyway. All right. Thank you, Elwell. I appreciate that. If you guys have super chats, please use that function as well. That goes to help the show. So I appreciate it. All right. Moving on. Let's get into DeVos and how she's screwing over students. Again. That's all she pretty much does, to be fair. Oh, no. That's not it. Okay. Now, Betsy DeVos wants to make it a little bit more difficult to get money for... let me start that again. Betsy DeVos wants to make it a little bit more difficult for students who are defrauded to be able to get their money back. Now, new rules proposed by the Secretary of Education would now impose stricter standards for students defrauded by for-profit colleges to qualify for relief on their federal loans. Now, they plan to rewrite the borrower defense to repayment rules. Now, that's an Obama-era rule, of course, that allowed students that were defrauded by for-profit colleges to be able to get some of their money back, to get student debt relief. Now, these rules would cut an estimated $13 billion in department spending, primarily awarded to defrauded students as debt relief, compared with Obama-era aid. So $13 billion, we're getting rid of that. So, hey, man, if you get defrauded, not only do you have a higher bar, but also there's less money for us to help you with. Well, congratulations. Now, raising the bar on federal loan relief claims, the proposal would require borrowers to prove that for-profit institutions either knowingly misled them or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. So that sounds like, okay, yeah, well, you got to prove it, right? Well, that's actually an incredibly high bar to prove in court. So that makes it much more difficult for you to go and if you believe that you have been defrauded, for example, places like ITT Tech and Corinthian, as well as Trump University, they did knowingly, defraud their students. And look, some of the one of the examples is some of the culinary schools, right, or schools with culinary programs. Well, they would post job numbers, right? Oh, look at all, like we have so many people that graduate from this and become chefs. Well, what's the definition of chef, right? What do they use as an example to define what a career in food service is as a chef? Well, they used people working at McDonald's as an example, and they included them in the number. Well, McDonald's, you're not exactly a chef at McDonald's. You're making minimum wage. Oftentimes, somewhere around $7.25 or the minimum wage of the current state that you reside in. That's not a career as a chef, but yet they included that in their numbers so they can say, hey, look, our programs are so successful, you should come to our school and spend your student loan money. That's defrauding. Again, under these new rules, it would be much more difficult to be able to prove that. As I said before, here's the bar. They have to prove that for-profit institutions knowingly misled them or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. Now, here's the thing. That's the point. The whole point is to put a giant bar in the way so they can protect the for-profit colleges. Look, borrowers, more of these rules, borrowers will also be required to transfer existing credits and to find an alternative institution to attend if their college closed. So instead of getting money back for their debt relief and paying off the debt that they had already accrued, no, they're going to have to go to a different college. So to finish out their program. So that doesn't help the student loan debt crisis, okay? Because they still end up having debt. Now, previous rules had allocated funds for borrowers in the event that the student's for-profit school shuttered unexpectedly, right? Now, let me tell you why that these rules are putting in place, right? Now, it turns out DeVos had staffed her department with multiple for-profit college sector executives. One of them was DeVos' senior advisor, Robert Eitel, who, prior to serving in the Trump administration, spent years as an executive at a for-profit college firm, Bridgepoint Education and Career Education Corporation. Eitel was brought on by the Education Department as DeVos worked to develop the stricter standards on borrower defense to repayment for defrauded students. Oh, so of course, we have these executives now that are helping to write these rules on what should happen if a student gets defrauded. I wonder who these rules are going to benefit. I mean, look, they're going to come up with rules that benefit the for-profit college industry. That's what's going to happen. Look, this is another attempt that to say that if you get defrauded, well, then you don't have recourse. You have an incredibly high bar to prove that you have been defrauded, and even so, you don't get the chance to use that money to pay off your existing debt. Instead, you're going to get put into another school. Which, look, some people might want to do so, but at the end of the day, they still have that enormous amount of debt left over from the school that's defrauded them. That's not good. Okay? So this is just another attempt to make sure that you cannot fight back against these for-profit schools. They are using the government to, again, prop up an industry that is by nature predatory. But that's what Betsy DeVos is all about. Okay. Moving on. Now, mother of three from Florida had passed away just days after paramedics are alleged to have not taken her to the hospital in an ambulance. Why? Now, why wouldn't they do that? I mean, look, if you're having a medical issue, normally you get taken by paramedics in an ambulance in order to get to the hospital. I mean, they were there. Why didn't they take her? Well, apparently, according to the mother, they assumed that she could not afford it. Let me give you the story here. In the early morning hours of July 4th, Nicole Black had found her daughter, 30-year-old Crystal Galloway, unresponsive in a bathtub just 6 days after she had given birth to her son via cesarean section. Now, it turns out that she had a stroke. Now, stroke happens to women who, I should say it's more likely to happen if you've given birth through cesarean section. So that's a definite risk factor. And so when Galloway had regained consciousness, she complained about her head, right? Oh, my head hurts. I think there's something wrong with me. I passed out in the tub. Maybe you should call the hospital. Well, that's exactly what happened. She explained that Black quickly called emergency services and said that her daughter was breathing but had been drooling from the mouth when she was, of course, when she was passed out. Now, when Hillsborough County Fire Rescue officials arrived, Black claimed that instead of providing immediate treatment, they questioned whether the family could afford the ambulance ride to the hospital. Wait, that's not something that they're supposed to ask, especially if there is a medical emergency. Well, she said, my daughter begged for her life. The only thing they were worried about was my daughter had a new baby and she couldn't afford an ambulance. The medics then carried Galloway down 3 flights of stairs and continued to spend time talking about the cost of the ambulance, according to the mother. So then Black told ABC Action News she decided to transport her daughter herself. Quote, the whole conversation as the EMS drivers put my child in the car is that it was best for us we couldn't afford an ambulance. My daughter begged for her life. She begged. And yet, they wouldn't take me. They wouldn't take her through the ambulance. So I decided to take her myself. Once in the hospital, scans revealed Galloway's brain was bleeding and that she was then airlifted to Tampa General Hospital. She then fell into a coma and passed away on July 9th, just days before her 31st birthday. So, look. So what this is a case of is alleged inaction by the paramedics, right? So they didn't do their job, and also the claims that we wanted to take an ambulance, but they kept talking about how expensive it was. Well, that's weird, right? Now, that, of course, led to an expensive airlift and ultimately her death. Now, let me tell you how much that ambulance ride would have been, right? And this is considering that there is that she was airlifted as well. The ride to Brandon Regional Hospital would have amounted to $600. So the paramedics not doing their job ended up costing more in an airlift, and the ultimate price, her life. Yeah, real smart. Wow. There's more. However, the paramedics are disputing Black's account. According to the New York Times, she said she voluntarily offered to take her daughter to the hospital and only requested their help to move her downstairs after she had spoke with two sheriff's deputies who had first arrived on the scene. In a statement sent to People magazine by the Hillsborough County Fire Rescue, Lieutenant John Mike Morris said the paramedics would have transported Galloway had her condition seemed critical when they arrived. Quote, "If the daughter presented that she was critical, I'm certain our crew would have highly advised that the daughter be transported by EMS." Now, here's the problem, right? I actually don't believe that. Why? Well, look, this is a similar story to what I've heard before. Now, I go back to the story of Amy Valala, right? Now, she recently ran for office in Nevada because her daughter, Shaylin, was turned away from a hospital, despite showing signs, if they had actually looked, of a possible blood clot. Now, that blood clot eventually traveled to her brain and led to her death. She was given what was referred to as a wallet biopsy. Now, guess what they both have in common? Both Shaylin and this woman. They were both part of the minority community. Who do you think this happens to more? Who do you think that people assume cannot afford an ambulance or cannot afford medical treatment or don't have insurance? Usually members of the minority community. So I do think this happened because, again, it's fairly common. I mean, they'll look at somebody's race and socioeconomic status and think, oh yeah, obviously, they're poor. So we're just going to do as little as we can because we're not going to get paid for this. So just like in Shaylin's case, the medics neglected to do their jobs. And actually, there was an investigation that found that this was the case. Hillsborough County Administrator Mike Merrill told reporters that while the medics did a lot of things wrong, they found no evidence the medics engaged in any conversation about ambulance costs. There were discussions between the mother and the deputies concerning costs, primarily driven by questions from the mother, which may have led to her conclusion or statements that she wanted to transport her daughter. My guys did a lot of things wrong here, and we take responsibility, but from the record I had, that's not one of the things that they did wrong. Why? It's because it would be absolutely fucking outrageous. Now, the county's investigation into the matter found that Morris and 3 other medics were in gross neglect of duty after they failed to properly check Galloway's vital signs. And again, nothing to do with the charge that they didn't, take her to the hospital because, well, it might be too expensive, right? Now, another one of their claims is that we didn't take her because she wasn't showing any signs of critical trauma. Now, if she had, then we would have definitely taken her in an ambulance, no questions asked. But then they undercut that by basically being found to have not have done their jobs correctly and not have taken vital signs. And how would you know if it was an emergency if you didn't check her vitals properly? Now, the inquiries also found the medics failed to have either of the women signed an informed consent document that showed that they declined transportation. So that's another thing that is against these paramedics, these EMTs. Now, based on the facts and statements obtained during the review of this incident by Human Resources, the information indicates that 4 fire rescue personnel did not perform their duties. The review indicates several Hillsborough County Fire Rescue Standard Operating Procedures were violated during this incident. No kidding. And that, of course, ended up in the death of this 30-year-old woman, this mother of 3. Look, man. Look, Black set up a GoFundMe page, right, after this happened, in order to raise funds to help provide for her 2 granddaughters, ages 13 and 7, and newborn grandson. She wrote on that page, "You know, this is a nightmare for me. I just buried my daughter. She was 30 years old and just graduated from college. She had her whole life ahead of her. You can tell me you're sorry. You can give me your condolences, but you still have to work this out with God." So there was a lot wrong here. This is a disastrous case. I mean, and the thing that I think back on is, what if this whole situation could have been avoided? Well, how? Well, nobody would be talking about potential cost. No one would even be having to ask about cost if we had a Medicare for all system. I mean, think about it, right? No wallet biopsies. No people assuming that you can't pay, and therefore not treating people as they should. That wouldn't happen. That doesn't happen in other countries that have actual single-payer healthcare systems. But it happens here in America all the time, where people do not get the care that they need because, well, we just assume that you're not going to be able to pay, so we're going to give you half-assed service. And they say that we are the best, country in the world when it comes to healthcare. I had a conversation with somebody earlier, with a conservative, and it was like, "We're the best healthcare in the world." No, we're not. I mean, I used to say, yeah, if you can pay for it, but that's not even the case. Because even the care that we get, that we pay exorbitantly for, is not as good as some of the other countries that have single-payer healthcare. We do not have the best healthcare in the world. We have some of the most expensive healthcare in the world, and it's literally killing people that they do not have healthcare. And it's situations like this that show you exactly what's going on and exactly what the problem of our system really is. It's a sick system. We have to change it. We have to get Medicare for all. And so we need to move forward on this. Okay. God, that's a sad story. Okay. Last story of the day. And by the way, I'm drinking ginger ale. Just in case you're wondering, it's good for my stomach. I haven't touched an alcoholic beverage in years. So, just to let you know. I know there's a lot of questions on that. You guys in the chat are weird sometimes. Okay, moving on. No, I forgot to change that. Okay. So prominent 2020 Democrats have come together to introduce a bill that would wipe out Puerto Rican debt. Now, The Intercept is reporting that Senators Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders are introducing the bill called the U.S. Territorial Relief Act of 2018. Now, they are joined by Senator Kamala Harris and Kirsten Gillibrand. So that puts many of the Senate's top contenders for the presidency on the record that they believe that we should wipe out Puerto Rico's debt. Now, right now, Puerto Rico carries over $70 billion in debt. A lot of it is from, of course, vulture capital firms, which is unsecured debt, and therefore eligible for relief. So look at that. We have unity in actually trying to do something for Puerto Rico. Now, that's awesome because, look, some of these Democrats actually supported the previous bill, which has been disastrous for Puerto Rico. Now, one of them was Kirsten Gillibrand. Now, she supported PROMESA, as it's dubbed, which created a fiscal oversight board in order to manage Puerto Rico's affairs. Now, what has that board done since they were appointed? And by the way, this was before they had a debt crisis before the hurricanes. So in order to try to tackle that debt, this board put in austerity proposals, which have led to mass protests, as well as a wave of privatization. Now, a lot of the assets here are sold off to finance interest payments. So that's what the board has been doing. Yeah, we privatize things, we sell it off, we sell public assets to private corporations, and then we use that money to pay off our interest to these vulture capital firms that swooped in and tried to buy off some of this debt. Well, that doesn't help the Puerto Rican people, and especially now after the hurricane. Now, the selling point in PROMESA, however, was the creation of a bankruptcy-like mechanism that could be used to wipe out some debt legally. Now, that is some debt, and unfortunately, they haven't really used that. Now, since the hurricanes, of course, basically destroyed the island's infrastructure, Puerto Rico is now in the position of having to rebuild, attract economic investment, and pay down their debt. Now, that is something that is very, very difficult to do, and they have not gotten a lot of help. In fact, Elizabeth Warren, in introducing this piece of legislation, said Puerto Rico was already being squeezed before Hurricane Maria hit and will now have to rebuild under the weight of crushing debt. Our bill gives territories that have suffered an extraordinary crisis a route to comprehensive debt relief and a chance to get back on their feet. Now, there's a House companion bill that's also being sponsored by Representative Nydia Velázquez. She said, after Maria, Puerto Rico needs every tool possible to recover physically and economically. This legislation provides another path for the island to get back on its feet and begin the journey toward a brighter future. I thank Senator Warren for her leadership, and I plan to introduce the House companion in September. Now, let me give you the details on what this bill actually includes. Now, under the bill, territories can opt for relief of unsecured public debt if they meet 2 out of 3 criteria. Now, that would be a population decrease of more than 5% over the past 10 years, the receipt of federal disaster assistance, and per capita debt over $15,000 per resident. Puerto Rico, just to show you like how badly Puerto Rico has been suffering, they qualify under 3 of these factors, all 3 of them. They have seen a massive population decrease. They've, of course, got hit by 2 hurricanes, so their federal disaster assistance, and, of course, that large amount, that $70 billion in debt. Now, the U.S. Virgin Islands also qualifies, by the way, under these 3 factors, so let's not forget about them. Now, the option, which could be used once every 7 years, would have to be ratified by the territory's legislature and governor, or by 2/3 vote of the legislature. Now, under the bill, creditors would have the opportunity to contest the discharge of their bonds in a streamlined judicial proceeding. So, yes, creditors are also being represented here as well. However, this is a great mechanism for putting that to the test. Like, so do these creditors have a good case? Or do they not have a good case because they came in and basically swooped this up at incredibly low rates? Now, the bill creates a $15 billion taxpayer-funded compensation fund to benefit Puerto Rican creditors, like residents, local businesses, and banks, and union and public pension plans, as long as it's taken up 3 years of enactment. So, if you have legitimate firms and not the vulture firms that would be hurt by this, there's a fund set up for them so that they can still be able to recoup some of their money, which is a good thing and sort of addresses that, hey, what about legitimate creditors? Like, what about, local businesses? What about banks that took out bonds? What are we going to do? Well, you're not going to get left in the dark, so that's great. Now, there are other firms, of course, that hold a lot of debt, like mutual funds like Oppenheimer and Franklin Advisors. Now, they manage Puerto Rico debt for retail investors in the United States. Now, they would also be eligible for some compensation if they waive managers' fees on it as well. A special master would allocate the funds. Losses would fall primarily on hedge fund speculators who scooped up Puerto Rican debt in search of a quick payday, though the losses would ultimately be relatively minimal given the bargain basement prices that investors paid for the junk bonds. Warren said, quote, disaster funding and other resources in struggling territories, budgets must not go to Wall Street vulture funds who snapped up their debt. Meanwhile, the Compensation Would Act, bill sponsors hope, as supplementary disaster relief for local bondholders to kickstart the economy. And the bill also creates an audit commission to explore causes and sources of Puerto Rican debt. So, look, again, a lot of this sounds really, really good and really, really helpful for people in Puerto Rico, which, again, has been just devastated. Not only by the hurricanes, but prior to that, they were facing an enormous debt crisis, which has led to a lot of pain, which unfortunately we have not paid a lot of attention to. Now, one question is here, well, is this actually legal? Can they actually do this, right? Is this kosher, right? As some people might ask. Well, Warren and Sanders have supplied a letter of support from 7 law professors who specialize in bankruptcy law, led by Georgetown University's Adam Levitin. Quote, he said, this is a bold stroke, the legislative equivalent of cutting through the Gordian knot. It recognizes the dire financial situation in the territories and awards relief without the time-consuming and expensive process of traditional bankruptcy proceeding. The professors concluded the law was indeed constitutional, consistent with Congress's authority to create rules on bankruptcy and for U.S. territories. So yes, it is legal. It is constitutional. They can eliminate this debt, and they can help Puerto Rico actually start to recover. They can help local business owners. They can help residents. They can help local banks. And they can even help some of the bigger creditors. But it's those vulture funds, those capitalists that swoop in and take advantage of places that have seen disaster. Those are the people that are going to lose out. So I think for all concerned, it's kind of a win-win. So this is a great piece of legislation. I don't think the Trump administration is going to take it up. So what we have to do is we have to make sure that we elect people who do care about Puerto Rico, people who do support this piece of legislation or pieces of legislation like this, get them into power, and then we can actually help Puerto Rico. Because the problem is not going away if we ignore it. And we've ignored Puerto Rico for way too long. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for joining. Thank you for going around the nation. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. I want to thank everybody for the super chats. By the way, I've got one here from Peter S., who says, I heart Bernie. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you. I like Bernie Sanders too. And thank you. I appreciate that. All right. That's all I have. Just a reminder, we'll be doing a Get Vocal on Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern, so join us on that, beta.getvocal.com. And I will be at a Flint rally for Abdul Al-Sayed, so if you see me there, if you're in Michigan, say hi. All right. That said, I'm getting out of here. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you back here on Monday. Thanks, everybody. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. See y'all tomorrow.